It's wonderful to have you all here. My name is Hugh Cole. I'm the director responsible for policy and strategy in the city. And I'm the director responsible for this partnership as well. So for those of you who are not from the city government, I sort of sit in a part of the city government called Future Planning and Resilience. And so I work across all the different functions of the city government. And I just want to say thanks in advance to our partners, J-PAL Africa, for the wonderful catering today. And we're going to kick off the event in a moment with a welcome from our city manager, Mr. Lungelo Mbandazayo.
Good afternoon, colleagues, distinguished guests. Welcome to the city of Cape Town and welcome to the launch of the unique partnership. Welcome to the Deputy Mayor and members of the Mayoral Committee and councillors. Welcome to the members of the executive leadership team and to all members of Team Cape Town who have joined us. I extend my warm welcome to our guests from academia, civil society, and the donor community who have joined us, particularly those who have traveled from afar. Of course, a special welcome to Professor Banerjee and Duflo and the team from J-PAL. The work of the professors and J-PAL speaks to our higher purpose as a city government, which is to take place out of poverty and to opportunity in Cape Town. And our 5-year strategy for this term of office is clear that to do this, we need to build a capable and a collaborative government. We need to make evidence-based decisions to deliver the best possible services to our residents. Our government values partnerships and takes climate resilience seriously. We have already experienced a climate shock in the form of drought, and we know that must prepare for more such shocks. The lab that we are launching this afternoon is a wonderful opportunity for the city to partner with leaders in the field to help us make a progress on all these points. And this is perhaps most applicable when it comes to innovation. We always challenge every member of our team to craft innovative solutions to the challenges we face. In collaboration with J-PAL, we will be able to stretch and strengthen our innovative muscle. I extend my thanks to the funders, academics, and officials who have worked hard to make this partnership possible. Thank you for choosing to work with the Team Cape Town. I look forward to discussions today and to seeing the projects that emerge from this collaboration. Professor Jack and colleagues, please do not hesitate to call on my office if you need any support. Thank you, and again, welcome to the city of Cape Town. Thank you.
Thanks to everyone for being here this afternoon. It's a great pleasure and a great honor to be able to introduce the Water, Air, and Energy Lab to you. You can call it the WAY Lab if you're looking for a shorter name. And this is a partnership, as you've already heard, between the City of Cape Town, Community Jameel, and the Poverty Action Lab. And you're all here at the City of Cape Town, so I assume you know what that is. And in a moment, you're going to hear from Community Jameel. So I thought I would start by telling you what is J-PAL. So J-PAL is an interesting research organization in that it's really a network. So it's a group of academics, primarily economists, from around the world who are motivated by the idea that evidence for policymaking is important. And so I'll tell you a little bit about kind of the type of research that we do, but what you can see on this map is a set of projects. So these are the J-PAL projects all around the world that have collaborated with different implementing partners to try to evaluate different programs to understand better what works, to scale up the things that are effective, and in many cases, to try to not scale up the things that are a little bit less effective. J-PAL is based at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in Boston and has a regional office, the Africa office, which is right down the road at the University of Cape Town. The colors of these dots that you can see represent the different sectors, and a lot of the work that we anticipate doing through this collaborative lab fall under the environment, energy, and climate change sector. This partnership is really the culmination of 10 years of already close collaboration between J-PAL Africa and the city of Cape Town. This is a little timeline that shows you the kind of history of events that have led up to today. So starting in 2013, this began with a data sharing agreement. One of the things that makes the city of Cape Town unique is its commitment to high quality data. This is important for just running the city, but it also facilitates research. It allows outsiders to come in and understand, do analyses, and collaborate on things that are otherwise sometimes very, very hard to observe. Things like how much energy people are using, how they're paying their bills, other things like that. So this began in 2015, which enabled Grant Smith, who was at the time a PhD student at the University of Cape Town, and I to do some work on prepaid electricity metering at the time. This led to subsequent projects and collaborations. So Martine Visser, who's also at the University of Cape Town, and I did some work around the drought, again, leveraging the data systems and data sharing that the city of Cape Town has. In 2019, several people, including colleagues from the University of Cape Town, Brendan Mon-Brown and Hugh Cole, who you've heard talking already, and I put together a chapter really demonstrating some of the innovative ways that the city of Cape Town has leveraged data for more effective policymaking and for evidence. And today, exciting, 2013 is when the Water, Air, and Energy Labs concept was initiated, but today is when it's really launching in Cape Town. So thank you for being here. This is part of 3 labs that, thanks to the vision and generosity of Community Jameel, J-PAL has been able to launch around the world. They're targeting different levels of government. So in Egypt, this is a national level collaboration with the government. In India, it's a state level collaboration. And here, it's a municipal level collaboration. The reason for thinking that this kind of model of embedding a lab in the city, in the governments, is really valuable is it helps shorten this path from evidence to policymaking by working very closely together, doing the things that I've listed here on the slide, starting with just co-identifying where are the evidence gaps, where are the opportunities to learn in the course of running this amazing city, then trying to think about what might be some innovative new ideas, what might be some opportunities for learning to co-generate evidence, so to work very closely together to bring research and practice into the same room and try to do sort of action research to try to understand in the course of implementation, in the course of operations, what's working, what's not working. And then finally, as needed, do things like help with data, help with technical assistance, and so on. But really, it's a privilege to work with such creative, committed staff, policymakers in the city. It makes this kind of collaboration a huge pleasure. Now, what makes this research a little bit unique, so already in the city there's a lot of research and analysis going on, is a methodology that kind of binds the J-PAL projects together. So I want to spend just a minute talking to you about what that methodology is. It's called a randomized controlled trial, or randomized evaluations, and so all of the projects that come out of this collaborative lab will have this methodology behind them. And the idea is in some ways very basic. It underlies the whole scientific method. So it's the idea that you really need a comparison in order to understand whether something is working or not. And so in this case, the idea is to just take the population of interest, and this could be households, this could be schools, this could be sort of whatever is the relevant unit for the policy. And in the course of designing the policy, in the course of developing the policy, evaluating the policy, to test it. And this involves taking some of this population and assigning it to a group that's going to be receiving something. It could be a phase out of a program, it could be a new program, it could be a tweak to a program. And another group to the status quo, so to continue to receive business as usual. What this means is that on average, these groups will be the same. And so then when we look in the data later on, any differences across this intervention group and the comparison group, it's relatively straightforward compared to a lot of the analyses that we otherwise have to do to be able to attribute differences to the program, to the intervention. I wanted to spend just a minute on this today because, especially for those of you who are here from the city, this is something that is much more embedded in kind of day-to-day practice and day-to-day activities than the kind of research that happens after a program has ended, when you're just looking at the data and trying to look backward in time and understand and reconstruct what actually happened. This is something that happens as part of the program and as part of the practice, and so your collaboration and engagement and involvement is really crucial for this to work. And it has to be driven by questions that you have. It really has to sort of come from a curiosity and a desire to understand better the efficacy of your programs. Okay, so the last thing that I want to spend just a moment on is kind of what's in scope. So this is called the Water, Air, and Energy Lab. What kinds of projects might you expect to see coming up under this collaborative lab? Well, you know, the air is all around us. The water, you were probably drinking some of it at the reception. In some ways, this is sort of part of very, very fundamental things that the city does on a day-to-day basis. Many of the basic services that the city is providing include electricity, that's the energy part, include water. But this also, I think, we want to think somewhat broadly about this. So this might also include, for example, flooding in informal settlements. Right? This is a huge challenge, this is a growing challenge. This might include, you know, it's already been mentioned, I suspect it will be mentioned again, the drought, right? So huge challenges associated with supply, increasing variability, but also inequality. So what services are affordable, who are they affordable to, how can we ensure that people who need basic services can actually access those basic services? This might include things like emissions from traffic congestion, how to reduce congestion and access in the city. This might include load shedding, again, something that all of you are very experienced with. Now, of course, it's not going to be feasible to randomly vary that, but we might be able to test out different things that help decrease some of the negative impacts associated with it, particularly perhaps for lower income households. So this is just a very, very, very brief overview. This is, I hope, the beginning of a long-run collaboration that helps pull in more research, not just on the topics that you see on this slide, but also on the wide range of topics that J-PAL researches, including in the city of Cape Town. So I should say there have been collaborations that include things like mental health, that include things like labor access. So really trying to use this as a jumping off point for this very tight type of collaboration that, if this succeeds, I think we can all hopefully agree has a huge promise. With that, let me wrap up and just say we really look forward to this collaboration, we look forward to this partnership, and I will hand it back over to you.
Thank you. Mayor Geordin, Hill Lewis, Professor Banerjee, Professor Duflo, guest speakers, ladies and gentlemen, it's a privilege to be able to address you at this timely and important event. I'd like to thank J-PAL Africa and of course the City of Cape Town for hosting us today. I'm honored to be addressing you today, especially in a city that I used to call home and will always hold a very special place in my heart. As you can all see, Cape Town is an incredibly unique city, not only for its natural beauty and the diverse community, but also as a cultural center across the continent as well. But like any city, it faces challenges when it comes to access to energy and also the future challenges that climate change will bring. And I think it's a testament to this city and the city officials that they're choosing to face these challenges head on and take a science-based approach at that. And I'm proud that Community Jameel will be a part of this journey with J-PAL and the City of Cape Town to launch the Water, Air, and Energy Lab that will improve access to clean air, water, and reliable energy for almost 5 million Cape Townians. So you already heard about the lab from Kelsey, and you're going to hear a lot more about it as well from my fellow speakers. But I thought I would focus my very short remarks on the importance of investing in evidence-informed policy and why Community Jameel decided to co-found the J-PAL Air and Water Labs here in Cape Town, but also, as you saw, in India and in Egypt as well. So as Hugh mentioned, Community Jameel is a global independent organization that advances science and learning for communities to thrive. We are a philanthropic organization with our chairman, Mr. Mohammed Jameel, from a family that comes from Jeddah in Saudi Arabia. And climate change is a very important part of our priorities, and we will continue to invest in science to help tackle these challenges and achieve impact at scale. So we've made a lot of investments in advancing science across the globe. We've financed groundbreaking research, and importantly, we've strengthened capacity to ensure that research is locally developed and takes into consideration traditional knowledge. But it's always critical that that research doesn't just stay in an academic institution, but that it impacts communities, especially the most vulnerable. And policy is obviously the best way to achieve that. Better policies result in stronger and more equitable decision and a better allocation of resources. Evidence and data, as you can see from what Kelsey presented, they can ensure equitable access to electricity and can help measure the health benefits of increased safe water adaptation. And nobody does this better and exemplifies these principles than J-PAL. It's been over 20 years now since Community Jameel made its first investment in J-PAL, and it's incredible that they've been, over that past 20 years, been able to reach 600 million people across the globe. And so with that, we are so proud to continue to that association with J-PAL and launch the Water, Air, and Energy Lab. Climate change and its impact on communities are continuing to evolve, and every day we read about research that uncovers new threats to livelihoods and ecosystems. So integrated government labs like this one that we are launching today are critical to protecting the most vulnerable, but most importantly, ensuring that policies continue to be updated and they continue to evolve as we better understand the impacts of climate change on communities. Our ambition at Community Jameel is to grow these government partnerships and to strengthen capacity within government and also the systems that surround it. And our mission to advance science-based approaches so that people can live healthier lives. So with that, thank you so much. I look forward to the rest of the evening and also to meeting many of you at the reception. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me here. Mayor Geordin, and there's Uzma from Community Jameel, our friends from J-PAL, our friends, our friends of friends of friends from the city government, and anybody else who happens to have been here. I'm delighted. This is really a delightful moment. It's a kind of moment, they should happen more often. When it happens, it's really extraordinarily, it's a privilege to be able to speak about them because they represent, in a sense, the fruition of lots of aspirations that we have in J-PAL. There are moments when those aspirations actually kind of converge on a point like this, and I'm so delighted to be able to be part of this celebration for that. I got to randomized control trials and this work kind of in a half asleep state, and that's, if you know me, that's not unusual. I'm mostly half asleep, and the point is that in some sense I was more not, I wasn't particularly directly aware of the potential implications that this kind of work might have had when we started this. We started this mostly, well, okay, not me. Because at this point of time in the mid-90s, I realized that I really didn't know anything. I was teaching development economics at MIT to brilliant students, some of whom are here, and students at Harvard and MIT. They're brilliant. I was telling them all kinds of things, and I didn't know almost anything. And I didn't know meaning. I knew that, for example, schools that have better grades had better infrastructure, or the children had, textbooks, but I didn't know whether that's the reason they were doing better or not. And so in some sense, and that's the key question. The question, we know the correlations. The question is, what is causative? And to be honest, I realized, and not being modest, I think I really realized that I didn't know anything. When I talked to policymakers, I would say something, but I realized that they could say, well, why do you believe that and not the opposite? And that conversation, I think, in some sense got us into trying to do randomized controlled trials, to have some answers that, at least to a first approximation, are not subject to that, that complicated conversation about, it's my guess or your guess. And that eventually persuaded us to start the Poverty Action Lab. We started Poverty Action Lab with, I think, eight affiliates, and I think who had a sum total of maybe 10 randomized controlled trials that had been either done or were on the way. Now we have 1,600 randomized controlled trials, and actually many more than that, because we don't actually know till they kind of come to some fruition. And we have 900 affiliates of one form or the other. That's we're just in a very different place, and I think a lot of that has happened through collaborations with institutions. J-PAL is a center at MIT. We have basically friendly centers like the one that's called J-PAL Africa, which is based in Cape Town. It's really a center at the University of Cape Town, and it was built would not have been possible to do without the help of people at the University of Cape Town. We are very grateful for that. To Murray Liebrandt as the leader of SALDRU, to Laura Poswell, who was our director for 10 years and executive director for 10 years, and who worked with SALDRU to make it happen. So there was similar stories you could tell about all the other centers as well. We really live off the intellectual environment provided by the University of Cape Town. We are very grateful to the administration at the University of Cape Town. Daya Reddy came to my talk yesterday. I know that maybe Jeff Murugan, who's the additional Vice Chancellor for Research, will be here, maybe here today. We really, all of their support is critical for where we have. Now, one of the things that support has allowed us to do is to build a portfolio of research. And in some ways, that portfolio of research is where I think naively we thought we would be. Because we thought that, well, once we do the research, it's just going to be there. The truth will be out there, and people will just adopt the truth. And I think, and sometimes it does happen. Sometimes when there's a clear question where there's already a debate. For example, I think the one example which Pascaline Jupa is actually in Cape Town. Her work with Jessica Cohen on the fact that when people are given free insecticide-treated bed nets, they use it, and malaria goes down. That was a great example of the kind of a randomized controlled trial that really changes policy, because largely because there was a debate about that. But in many cases, it's really what we have is there's a distance between that and the policy question that people are asking. And that's where a lab like this one steps in. It steps in because you can do the best research possible, but if there isn't really a sharp question that it directly answers, then people say, okay, well, but what do you have to tell me about what I want to know? And what we've since learned is that this series of labs that we have set up with governments, in Peru with the government on education, in the state of Tamil Nadu in India with the government on a variety of topics, largely to do with health, in many other places in the world, working with governments. What it does, it gives us an opportunity to embed ourselves into those conversations, so that when we hear, we don't come to people and say, we have this evidence, use it. We come to say, with the understanding that, people have other priorities, and it's when we listen to them that we learn what the questions are that we need to answer. It gives an opportunity, a seat at the table. I think the advantage of this approach of building labs is precisely that we get to have a seat at a table where people who are doing actually who have busy lives, who are doing important things, who are some part of the way towards, asking a question, we can talk to them, we can try to see if what we know or what we could know by doing an experiment could somehow contribute to what they're interested in. And we've been doing this, as I said, formally as a lab in Indonesia, for example. We haven't functioned as formally as a lab, but we've been collaborating with the government for 15 years now. With the government comes, when the government has a policy change in mind, we get often a message saying, we are going to change this policy in the near future. If you have something to say, this is your chance. And then sometimes we have something useful to say, sometimes we don't, but at least it gives us a moment to, it focuses the brain like nothing else. When you say 6 months, the policy will change, it's going to affect the lives of 220 million people. What do you want to do about it? It's really an excellent way to get interested in the right question. And that's, I think, the value of an enterprise like this. And that's why I think of these labs as being kind of the pinnacle of our success. When we are able to have these labs, we are put ourselves in a position to get into those conversations, which eventually give value to the work we do. And it's really extremely, it's really an extreme a privilege to be able to be part of this launch. I will honestly say I did nothing to make it happen. And so it's especially delightful when somebody else does the work and I can get to take some credit for it. Thank you, Kelsey. Thank you, Community Jameel. Thank you, City of Cape Town, for making it happen. It's a really wonderful moment. I do also want to say that it is about policy. This is about policy, but it's also about research. In a sense, each of these labs, eventually what it does is it helps change the whole world. When people ask us, well, why should you take it seriously? Part of what we do is we drop names. We say we work with the government of Cape Town. And that name dropping works because people don't, you're a professor, but what do professors know? But if you say we work with the government, City of Cape Town, and we worked on this particular policy change in Indonesia, then people take us seriously. And so it is about valorizing the research, but it's also, I think, about launching new research. I think eventually this is an opportunity for us to also think new thoughts. Every research opportunity, however policy directed, eventually turns out to be a slightly different thought. It's not just a practical question. It is also a question that's deep often and ways which we don't anticipate, but eventually allow us to frame things that we wouldn't have otherwise. It helps us answer questions that are not just valuable in Cape Town, but will be valuable everywhere in the world. People will use the research that we do from here and take it elsewhere. And I think that And in the process, the other thing that I think that 1,600 affiliates didn't come about by, the 900 affiliates didn't come about by some act of academic will. It came out of the fact that in the process of doing the work, you attract people. People are interested in the work. That's because the work is useful, because it's changing lives. You attract the most, both the people who are both the most, committed and the most serious. And those people eventually do other research, and that's how our network grows. So these are really, and in particular, I hope that this process at this moment will actually lead to give a fillip to something we're trying to do, which is to create a network of African researchers who will work on African problems. And I think that the African Scholars Program in J-PAL will get a huge boost from the fact that now there are opportunities to work on research on important topics in Africa. And I think that also is one of the great privileges that we get from this partnership. So I hope I have given you a sense of why we are excited about it. I hope you are excited about it, and thank you very much.
Yeah, what we wanted to do is take advantage of this kind of nice confluence of people who have great insight and experience and have a bit of a conversation. So this will be a bit informal, a bit unscripted, and I'm going to start with some questions, and then I think we'll open it up and give you all the chance to ask some questions. And so with that, if I may. Okay, wonderful. I'm going to start with you, Mayor Hill-Lewis. Geordin, if I may?
Of course.
Great. So in your 2 years as mayor, how has your vision for what are the most pressing climate or environment-related issues in the city changed, if at all? And are there new challenges that you didn't foresee when you started, or has it been sort of same priorities throughout?
Well, thank you so much, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and what an absolute pleasure and privilege it is to host such distinguished guests here at the City of Cape Town. You are very, very warmly welcome, and have a lovely time in the mother city. I think the priorities and vision haven't changed all that much, perhaps some new challenges added onto the agenda. But when I came into office, I was quite clear, as was every single Cape Townian who lived through our terrifying drought, in a 4-year drought, which ended finally in 2018, that brought us very close within kind of 30 days or so of running out of fresh potable water. So, water scarcity and the provision of clean drinking water is top of mind for literally every Cape Townian. It's had the remarkable effect of achieving near unanimity in a society on a major environmental issue, which is one of the benefits of going through that crisis. And so when we talk about the enormous expenditure required in water infrastructure to secure new sources of water for the future, there's kind of hardly a peep of opposition in Cape Town, which is quite remarkable and unheard of in global infrastructure discussions. Added to that, I was very passionate about cleaning up some very badly polluted water bodies inside the city, because so much of Cape Town's global appeal relates to its natural beauty, and it was very important for me that those kind of wild and beautiful spaces be preserved for future generations of Cape Townians. And I always thought it was a tragedy that they had ever been allowed to get to that condition, because when I grew up in the city, we used to use those, what we call a flay. It's like a lake. What's the English word for a flay? A water body, a big inland water body. We used to use those recreationally. We would swim in them and picnic around them and so on. And so it was very important to me that they be cleaned up for both to revive their ecosystems, but also for public use in the future. And then, of course, South Africa has an energy crisis. We have an energy supply crisis that has crippled the country's economy for 10 years or more like 15, and has been escalating. It's been getting worse the last few years, not better. And that's not strictly climate related, but it just happens to be the case that 95% of South Africa's energy is dirty coal energy. And so we found that the faster we could engage and embrace the low carbon energy transition in Cape Town, we could both end that energy supply crisis and achieve much cleaner energy. I think the only thing that I would add to that is well, maybe two brief things. First, I don't think that we've paid quite enough attention, and I mean at a senior leadership level. I'm taking responsibility for this, to air quality issues, and I think we are far behind the curve in the transition to electric vehicles. And then something that I have been very passionate about, but would love to read the research and what the data says on actually how to achieve success in it, and that is the issue of waterborne plastic and the choking of our rivers and oceans with rubbish and litter. We have tried and invested a huge amount of time and resources, and it doesn't really feel like we are yet moving the needle. So we may need to lean on some of the research the professors told us about on how to do that, and hopefully this lab can be helpful in that regard.
Wonderful. Let's talk a little bit about that, about the role of evidence. Professor Duflo, Esther, if I may. So can you share an example of when a research project that you worked on influenced policy? What happened and what were the key ingredients that helped make that change, and did it persist?
First of all, thank you so much. Thank you for having us here. It's a privilege to meet you and to be here and launching this lab. So maybe a fitting example is one that's kind of a precursor to the Gujarat brother of the Air and Water Lab. It was happened before the lab in India, which is in Gujarat, got started, but it was maybe the first of the collaboration that eventually led to a natural place for the Air and Water Lab in Gujarat. And we were approached, we being Rohini Pandey, Michael Greenstone, Nick Ryan, myself, we were approached by the lawyer for the Gujarat Pollution Control Board, the Gujarat Pollution Control Board being in charge, as its name indicates, of regulating pollution, in particular pollution from. They have a lawyer, and we were approached by this lawyer because they had a funny lawsuit, which is the farms that they were regulating were suing the Gujarat Pollution Control Board, saying, well, there is this scheme which requires us to ask for an audit, a third-party audit by a private firm every year. This is something that was in place in Gujarat for a while. So each firm, in particular in the very polluting sector, needed to hire someone from the market to do an environmental audit every year. And the firms were suing because they were saying the scheme is so ineffective and so much does nothing to affect our own pollution that it's like a tax. And therefore you have to remove it because it's not in your authority to impose a tax. So paradoxically, the firm were admitting that they were so good at flouting the impact of the scheme that the scheme was useless. Fortunately, they lost that particular lawsuit, but in the process, it was pretty clear actually to everybody that the scheme wasn't doing what it was supposed to do. So we were kind of approached to start kind of really brainstorming about, the scheme exists, how do you make it work a little bit better? So we took some time to understand this market, and what became striking is that these private firms, private auditors, are actually hired by the firms and paid by the firms. So the quickest way to maintain your business with the firm is to provide with the firm what they would like to hear, which is a perfectly clean slate. So the auditors, the whole industry of auditors has sprung up to provide this report very, very cheaply, because if you're going to make up the data, why collect the data? You might as well fudge it. It's much faster and cheaper. And so they were all like producing this very cheap report, giving people very clean bills. That was the understanding from the auditor, that this is how the market works. Everybody agreed on that. So we kind of, in brainstorming with the Gujarat Pollution Board, we were thinking of trying to come up with, we really being a collective we, all of the officers of the board and the lawyers and the people who were using to go to do this, to kind of monitor the monitors in a way, to what is the scheme that is legal, that satisfies the law that are in place, but wouldn't have this issue. And we finally landed in a place where the firm, instead of paying the monitors directly, would need to pay into a pool. And the pool would hire the auditor. And the auditor would be randomly assigned to the firm. Not for evaluation purpose, actually, but just because in this way, there is no kind of link between the two. And then, so that severs the financial link between the firm and the auditor. And then to kind of replace this link by a link to the truth or to the public interest, we told the auditors that they would be monitored by a university, a local technical college, and if they were very different, the results were very different, they would be fired from the scheme. And so this is how we, kind of the scheme was designed, and then it took a while, but we were able to set up an evaluation of the scheme. And what was interesting is in the control group, the places that kind of continued business as usual, we still send this university to back check the monitors, and we found that like 75% of the report were within 10% of the threshold for pollution for every pollutant. So either the firms are really, really good at fine-tuning exactly where they need to be, or these reports are cooked. And then in the back check, it turns out that the actual pollution was all over the place. Some of it was lower, some of it was higher, which kind of confirmed the hunch that everybody had that the reports were cooked. But in the treatment group where these changes were put in place, this basically excess mass just at the threshold entirely disappeared. So it looked like the auditors, the reports were much cleaner. And then down the line, it actually led to a reduction of pollution, of emissions, in particular for the most polluting of those firms. So that was successful. The people, Gujarat Pollution Control Board was very happy with this. They wanted to keep it. And then they really worked very hard. And at this point, they took over to kind of do whatever tweak was needed to make this scheme compliant with all of the laws of Gujarat and the Supreme Court of Gujarat, etc., such that at this point, it is law. This is how the system works. And this was kind of the beginning of a long collaboration. It went from project to project, again in very, very close partnership with what are the questions that are of interest to them, leading eventually to the creation of the lab, but after many other interesting projects.
It's inspiring, isn't it? So if you could have evidence on effective policy to resolve one issue or kind of policy problem, what would that policy problem be?
I think I probably would go back to the enormous volume and problem with waste that we have in Cape Town, and our ability to prevent that waste from ending up in water bodies. Because that's so fundamentally impacts on people's sense of cleanliness, well-being, and dignity, and on the city's sense of well-being. And it is just such an unbelievably tough nut to crack that I think I would be fascinated by some further research and data on that.
That's great. I'm very glad you answered in scope for the lab. I should have prompted you on that, but you knew what I was after there. Esther, let me actually come back to you. And I think we've talked about the fact that this lab really is a very deep collaboration between colleagues at the University of Cape Town, between collaborators within the city, between J-PAL staff, the network, and so on. And you've partnered with a large variety of organizations on research projects ranging from very local NGOs all the way up to national governments. Can you tell us a little bit about what some of the kind of key levers have been to create meaningful partnerships and develop research projects that actually are both kind of interesting for the world, as sort of hit the sweet spot that Abhijit was describing of interesting to the world and important and impactful beyond that particular case, but also really effective in answering the kind of immediate needs of this partnership?
Thank you. I think if I would name one thing, it's really time. So we are, I think, maybe by our constitution, almost the opposite of consultants that can deliver an answer to any problem. So, for example, for your trash problem, if you can probably get an answer from McKinsey pretty quickly. It might cost you a lot of money, but it will come, and nicely packaged with very good slides. Yeah, and an excellent one. We've become better at making PowerPoint presentation, but other than that, I think the fundamental difference would be, and we are much, much cheaper because we don't charge for our time, but we are also a little more expensive potentially because we would be taking time. And I think the way in which things are we'd be taking our time, and we'd be thinking not so much of your time, hopefully, but the time of like many, many people who are actually running things. So if I go back to my Gujarat example, the way that this kind of collaboration was successful, it's not because I flew it to Gujarat and had a meeting with the chief minister. Actually, never met the chief minister at that time or later, but it's because us and then the staff on the project spent a lot of time on the couch waiting for the right moment to grab people and talk to them. And they in turn spent a lot of time in meeting rooms and took us around in inspection. We visited farms and we kind of worked with the inspectors to see what they work with and spend time with the monitors. And every project is kind of like that. So first of all, it starts with a question that is meaningful to the partner. And then, of course, meaningful enough for us that we have something to answer. We have something to do. And then kind of a long process of maybe this first question and that question and that question, and then kind of progressively move on in this maybe more, and it can start ambitious, and then it can also start less ambitious, but become more and more ambitious as we move along. So I think that is the way, and a lot of our partnership, and again, that's a big we, because it's not just my experience, I think it's the experience of anyone who has been involved in J-PAL is, you go, it's kind of in the long run, building over time, and kind of building a lot of trust, not just with individual people, but also with the whole institutions around them. So I think that.
Great, and hopefully
sorry just to say, so that you don't think that, we come here and we'll have to wait 20 years to get something from them. Another key factor of success, and that I've been learning a little bit over time, that it's really important, but now I think we've become much better at it, is that another nature of time is that, especially time in policies, goes fast, and people need to answer quickly on something, and some answers actually come along the way. So another feature of time is actually being able to be there and saying, this is what we found from our first quick survey, this is what people say about this problem, or you thought, or we thought the main constraint would be this one, but in fact it's that one, or in fact we thought the main constraint would be this one, and it is this one, so this is really where we need to go. So the combination of the the time that it takes to get the final answer, which might be long and people have to be patient, including us, and the time that it takes to do policy, which is very fast-paced. And in fact, we are able to generate in these collaborations the data that is useful in a timely manner.
And I think one of the things that's really powerful about this particular setting is the ability of administrative data sets that are very well utilized, that the very great work within the city to take data seriously means that it's possible actually to get answers much more quickly than if it's all based on going out and finding people and surveying them and all of that. So I think that's a really strong asset. Keeping an eye on the time, I do want to see if there are questions in the audience that we should take. Otherwise, I have plenty more, but I want to see what others have to say.
There's one over there.
Yeah, hello. My name is Jess Quist, and I'm from J-PAL Africa. I live in Johannesburg, and I feel like because the Johannesburg people didn't go through what your city went through with the water crisis, I feel like people are quite complacent about wasting water. So my question is to you, Mr. Mayor. What advice would you have for other provincial governments regarding this water crisis? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do you want to answer that one or to take? Okay. I mean, the true resounding and outstanding success of Cape Town's ability to survive that terrible drought was its ability to mobilize public support for dramatically reducing water consumption. So there was actually no engineering solution inside the drought period. There was some pressure control mechanisms, but there was no major new supply of water at all during the drought. It was overwhelmingly mobilizing public support for understanding that this is serious. Now, of course, you're greatly helped by the fear factor, which really focused everyone's minds. Nothing focuses the mind like having, the city started putting out preparatory notices. If you have to go to a central water point to collect your water, this is where your allocated water point will be. People totally freaked out and started dramatically cutting their consumption even further, down to, I think, something like 25 liters per person per day for all needs. Drinking, sanitation, everything. So very, very low usage. The city also did incredibly well at that time to communicate ways in which you could practically control your usage at a household level. And so lots of households, including my own, implemented all of those things, all of that good advice that we were getting from the city, and then never really stopped afterwards. So even though water usage has begun to tick upwards again in Cape Town, but so the population has grown significantly since 2018. People have been, in general, much, much more respectful of water as a precious resource since then than they were before. I suspect that that's going to happen naturally. It's probably happening right now, since most of Joburg has been without water for 10 days. And people are already collecting from central tanker points and so on. So I think that's probably already happening. But when we talk to other cities, and we do this quite regularly now, we talk to other cities around the world about our learnings, we spend a little bit of time, maybe 10 or 20 minutes, talking about engineering solutions, and we spend the vast majority of the time talking about strategies for getting public buy-in for dramatic reduction in consumption and greater respect in their everyday life for water as a resource. And we have to get to that point in South Africa, and we will get there by necessity. That was really the biggest part of Cape Town's success.
If I may, emphasize how this is a general lesson that we should take to the whole question of climate change. Because in the climate change conversation, there is an enormous amount of focus on technology as the solution, and maybe over-optimism on technology, and coupled with some despondency of the ability of people to change their behavior. And I think the example shows that actually with enough people are able to change their behavior with enough social pressure plus the fear factor in this case, they will change their behavior. And then we are really creature of habits. So if we manage to change people's behavior in the short run, it has a tendency to stay on. And you gave this example for water, and it's been shown in other contexts for energy use, for example. And so this is really a wonderful kind of example of what can be done on behavior, and to keep in mind that a lot of the solutions to move forward are not going to be technology. They are going to be changes in the way people can do it. And I'm sure Cape Townians are not significantly sadder now that they use a little less water.
Actually, I think most of us had a wonderful sense of accomplishment, achievement, at being able to get by with actually very little.
That's a very nice, inspiring note to end on. So I'm afraid we're out of time. Thank you all. Thank you, Geordin, Esther. Thanks to everyone. I'm going to pass it back to the MC, and there should be time at the reception for more questions, more discussion, and so on. So thank you again.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Vinayak Bhardwaj. As been mentioned, I'm the Executive Director of J-PAL Africa. It's been a real privilege to co-host this evening with our esteemed partners, City of Cape Town and the Community Jameel, as we launch this Water, Air and Energy Lab. It's now common cause, as has been discussed, that the climate challenge is a global one. And as Cape Town's experience shows with its very narrowly averted day zero, the consequences are real, they're immediate, and solutions are urgently needed. So we're greatly inspired by the leadership that's been shown by the City of Cape Town in tackling these and other challenges, the ingenuity that they've shown in developing innovative solutions for the city's across many departments, often from the ground up, are helping improve the lives of the city's residents. This Water, Air and Energy Lab is part of a broader effort, as has been mentioned, launched by J-PAL and Community Jameel across the world to launch water and air labs. And under this banner, after similar initiatives set up in South Asia and Middle East and North Africa region, the goal is really to try and bring evidence-based insights to the most urgent problem facing our planet. We hope to learn together with you and to share our lessons widely and to ensure that we mitigate the impoverishing consequences of climate change in this city and elsewhere. I'd like to acknowledge the staff from both teams, from the City of Cape Town and from my team at J-PAL Africa, as well as colleagues across the world who worked tirelessly to make this evening such an insightful, inspiring, and meaningful experience. Thank you so much. I would also like to thank the Stellenbosch Institute for Advanced Study, who've been running a fantastic Nobel Symposium this week, and through whose auspices we were able to welcome our co-founders and co-directors, Professors Abhijit Banerjee and Professor Esther Duflo. I'd also like to thank the Mayor of Cape Town, Honorable Hill Lewis, and our board member and sort of architect of this initiative, Professor Kelsey Jack. Your leadership has been so vital in kickstarting this partnership, which we hope will generate important new insights. Thank you all for attending. Please continue to be a part of this effort by connecting with our staff and researchers in attendance and sharing your experiences here today. I wish you all involved in this initiative much success, and I now invite you to transition to the other side of the hall to enjoy conversation over drinks and hors d'oeuvres, and I look forward to speaking with many of you later tonight. Thank you so much.